As is tradition, I ask you guys every single year to provide me the most undiscovered gems of the year. The albums that have gone fully under the radar, completely under the radar, that deserve way more love, way more attention, and need to be highlighted somewhere for the world to see and to hear. And in case you're running out of albums and you feel like you haven't got your list fully together yet, I give you guys 10 albums just in case that you guys have sent to me that might be worth including on your year-end list. And trust me, there's quite a few on this list that I think will appeal to a lot of people. There's a lot of variety, as is every single year. So without further ado, let's not waste any time. Let's just get into the list of the albums you gave to me and I think are worth your time. Starting with Michelle, this is a girl group that are providing some really nice, sweet, endearing pop songs. Seriously, just a really, really catchy, melodic album from start to end. Not really any tricks or shits and giggles, as they might say. There isn't really anything complex going on here. They are just ridiculously earwormy tunes. The track Owens. Oh, what a song. You deserve it, girl. It's got this nice like throwback vibe to it. It's really, really classy. Oh, it's so catchy, so fun. Just a really magnetic album, you know? It's just addictive, straight to the point, but really done well. I think anyone that just wants an extra pop album for the year-end list, you're going to want to add this one. On the straight opposite end of the scale, though, I want to mention Deadletter. These guys are a classic post-punk sounding outfit, very much beefy guitars and a striking and scratching vocalist, but that's not to be said in a negative way. I actually think these guys are really cool. I think if you're a fan of like Fontaine's DC, honestly, I don't think you're going to really be wanting to miss these guys, because they're not really talked about that much, but they definitely have a sound to them that I think they're doing really well. I think the closing track is really cool too. Yeah, Deadletter I think are definitely worth your time. I randomly heard them in a bar in Greece too, and I was like, I recognize this because I just done the album a few days before, after it had been sent to me by somebody over on Twitter, I think it was, and I was like, this sounds familiar. And then it was a track from like 2 years ago. It didn't even make it onto this album. And I was like, well, I never. Maybe they're not so undiscovered in Greece. Perhaps they aren't. But yeah, don't really see much to talk about with these guys. But I think there's a lot of potential for these guys to be much bigger than they are. So I wanted to mention it. I was in fact already familiar with Winter a few years ago. I'd done one of their albums. It was really nice. It was very dreamy and very likable. And to be honest, it made me think that was that submitted in a previous video for this ongoing yearly series. It might have been, but if they were, they make it back again, because Winter is out with a new EP. This isn't an album, it's an EP, and yeah, it's really nice. It's kind of progressed the sound a little bit more, like there's some kind of trip hop elements, even a bit of like a tint of baggy, I would even say, on one of the tracks, a little hinty of it, but still got that kind of dreamy aesthetic. It's a really solid EP, just 4 tracks, nothing that I am absolutely head over heels for, but I did like it when I was hearing it, so wanted to mention it. Also want to mention Christopher Owens, who as a solo name might not be too recognizable, but is in fact a member of the band Girls. You know, those indie fellas from like the late 2000s, early 2010s that Pitchfork gassed up. I mean, you might not know Girls. I don't think they're talked about that much these days, but there was a time where they were talked about, so you might know them. But yeah, the Christopher Owens is the lead singer. Some pretty cool sort of like singer-songwriter delves into like, you know, depressive episodes on this album. Very much kind of like a gloomy sounding singer-songwriter album, but I thought it was good. I thought it was presented well. And on the same kind of vein, although a little bit peppier, I did want to also mention Sam Blasucci, who I think has given a sort of like Father John Misty vibe of an album. It's kind of like throwing it back to the 70s. You know, I Love You Honey Bear, that was like obsessed with like some like Beatles worship and like Harry Nilsson and Billy Joel. Like that's what this album is doing now. Obviously, Father John Misty has kind of progressed a little bit past that now, but Sam Blasucci, if you're a big fan of the early Father John Misty stuff, I think you're going to like this one, because it's very much in that vein. Really lovely melodies, it's peppy, it's upbeat. I like it. It's very much taking it back to like the retro days of singer-songwriter albums, so I'm not going to call it the most original thing out there, but I enjoyed it. I have to mention Cuni, because this has the greatest shot of making my year-end list of any album that I mentioned in this video, which is high praise, because there is always one or two that get sent to me when I do this every year that do make my year-end list, and this is the one that I think has the best shot at it. That's not to say any of the others aren't worth listening to, of course, but yeah, Cuni I have to mention here, because this is an explosive, monstrous, huge in scope Midwest emo album that just really blisters and smashes and has really great crescendo moments. Like, the instrumentation is just explosive at so many points. It's really, really great. And the closing track as well, Riley, I mean, the vocals on that track are ridiculously passionate and full of just heartache. It's a really, really powerful song. Really impressed with this one. I think a lot of Midwest emo fans have accidentally let this go a bit under the radar, which is obviously the point of this video. But no, seriously, like, I checked Rate Your Music, this had like 22 ratings as of recording this video. I mean, that's ridiculous, man. There's a massive audience for this. Even some of the ones I'm mentioning in this video have like hundreds of ratings, so this one is really, really one that I think can resonate with a lot of people. Please do it. Hudson Lee is part of the Neuro Hop wave, which I have been pretty happy with whenever I've heard anything of that genre, actually. Whenever I've heard anything tagged as Neuro Hop, which I didn't really know what was to begin with, but whenever I have heard something that is tagged as it, I've really liked it, and this is another example of that. And funnily enough, the albums I have heard that are in that vein, Volume, or Volume, I think is how you say it, but it's spelled like Volume, and Cone Sound, make it onto this album. So I'm assuming a lot of these artists are very much affiliated with one another, because yeah, those artists I'm very familiar with. And Hudson Lee is another addition to this sound. Really wonky, quirky, eclectic sounds. I was definitely beaming when I heard some of these tracks, because they're just so like colourful and exciting and take you in these really odd, quirky directions. Yeah, it's cool. Antonina Nowacka, I think, is one of the most peaceful and beautiful albums of this year. It's just this really, really like lovely ambient sound throughout this whole thing. It's just got some really stunning instrumentals. Not really huge amounts to say other than that, but I think honestly that's enough to really sell it, because it kind of speaks for itself in that sense. Just a really gorgeous, low-key album. And I also want to mention Judeline, which is this kind of like cool mix of like flamenco nuevo and like alt pop and R&B just kind of fused all together. It's got this kind of like minimal sound. I actually think some of the tracks that have a bit more of a sharper melody are definitely some of the better tracks, but I was kind of impressed with how like dark and gloomy and moody it sounded. I was very impressed with this one. And also, I'm name dropping a lot of comparisons in this video, because I do think it's important just to give these artists a little bit of a boost, because by saying the name Rosalia, I think is enough for people to want to hear this, because people love Rosalia, as do I. So yeah, I think Judeline is definitely one to watch for the future. Definitely one to watch for this kind of Latin pop wave that's exploding at the moment. I was impressed with this. And my final pick, remember though that this is in no particular order, so this is no slight on the artist being last, but I had to mention Francis of Delirium, which is this really cool indie pop rock band that are really kind of taking it back to basics. This is a very familiar sound, but it's done really well. Like, I think if you're a fan of like bands like Hop Along, the instrumentals really at times reminded me of that, but just imagine a bit more of like a softer vocal that's on top of those kinds of instrumentals, and you're really going to get Francis of Delirium. Some really good tracks. I thought Blue Tuesday was a massive highlight on this album, and yeah, very much just a good case of a band doing their style really well. There's not really any like complexities going on here, similarly with what I said about the first artist I mentioned on this video, Michelle, where it's just kind of like straightforward, but it's done well and you can't really complain. And that is it from me. Want to highlight my Patreon before I end this though, as I always like to do. Make sure you consider supporting me over on there. a lot of time and effort goes into these videos, despite the fact that I do work a full-time job as well as doing this. It's very difficult to keep a balance, but if you guys can consider supporting me, that would be absolutely wonderful. But at the very least, you can like the video, you can subscribe to the channel. That costs nothing. And you can maybe even share the video if you liked it so much. Let me know your thoughts on any of these albums in the comments too, if there's anything you checked out that you're, you know, a really big fan of because you saw this video. Would love to see that, always love to see that. And then of course, maybe just comment some extras that you wanted to highlight in the comments too. If you are interested in recommending any more albums, please go ahead. And yeah, more year-end lists are on the way. I love this time of year. It's so exciting. It's so fun. It's so joyous. And hopefully you guys are enjoying it as much as I am as well. Do subscribe, as I've already said. Have a good day and goodbye.